Life has a way of bringing people together in the most unexpected places. For Sarah Mitchell, it was just another late-night shift at Pete's 24-hour garage, her hands covered in engine grease as she juggled this job with another, all while raising her young daughter alone. When Michael Bradford's expensive sports car rolled in with mysterious engine trouble, she had no idea this routine repair would change everything. As dawn painted the sky in soft pastels, his eyes caught the glint of her worn silver wedding band, a simple ring with an extraordinary story. What happened next would transform both their lives forever. Could a chance encounter over a broken engine lead to something neither of them was looking for? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The familiar buzz of Sarah Mitchell's alarm cut through the pre-dawn silence at 5:15 a.m. Her hand instinctively reached to silence it before the sound could wake Emma, sleeping peacefully in the next room of their modest two-bedroom apartment. The morning routine was well rehearsed, like a dance she'd performed thousands of times before. In the dim light of her bathroom, Sarah studied her reflection. 42 years old, with laugh lines beginning to crease the corners of her eyes, and a few strands of silver threading through her chestnut hair. The woman in the mirror looked tired but determined, her green eyes holding the same quiet strength they'd carried for the past 5 years, ever since David's accident. The old family photo album lay open on her dresser, its pages worn from frequent handling. Sarah's fingers traced the edge of a photograph, Emma's 4th birthday, the last one they'd celebrated as a complete family. David's smile beamed from behind the birthday cake, his mechanic's hands clean for once, as he helped their daughter blow out the candles. 2 months later, a drunk driver would end that chapter of their lives forever. Sarah pulled on her work uniform, the name Pete's 24-hour garage, embroidered above the pocket in faded blue thread. Pete had been David's mentor, and when Sarah needed work after the accident, he didn't hesitate to hire her. She'd learned everything about cars at David's side over their 15 years together, and now those skills kept their daughter fed. "Mommy?" Emma's sleepy voice drifted from the doorway. At 8 years old, she was already showing signs of the beauty she would become, with her father's dark curls and Sarah's green eyes. "Hey, sweetie, did I wake you?" Sarah crossed the room, wrapping her daughter in a warm embrace. "No, I wanted to see you before you go." Emma's arms tightened around her mother's waist. "Will Maria make pancakes today?" Sarah smiled, breathing in the familiar scent of her daughter's strawberry shampoo. "If you ask nicely, I'm sure she will. Remember to finish your homework before watching TV, okay?" Maria Rodriguez had been their saving grace these past few years. A retired teacher who lived in the apartment below, she'd become Emma's surrogate grandmother, watching her during Sarah's night shifts at the garage and early morning hours at her second job at the local diner. The arrangement wasn't ideal, but it worked. "I wish you didn't have to work at night," Emma murmured into her mother's uniform. Sarah's heart clenched. "I know, baby, but remember what we always say, everything we do together." Sarah finished, their daily mantra a promise between them. The morning light was just beginning to soften the edges of night when Sarah knocked on Maria's door. The older woman answered with a knowing smile, already dressed and ready for their daily handoff. Emma ate a little breakfast, but she might want more later, Sarah explained, handing over Emma's backpack. "I packed her lunch, and there's money for pizza in the front pocket if you're too tired to cook dinner." Maria waved away her concerns, with the confidence of someone who'd done this hundreds of times before. "Go, Mihija. We'll be fine. Your girl is an angel." Sarah kissed Emma goodbye, her worn silver wedding band catching the hallway light as she stroked her daughter's hair. The ring was too big now. She'd lost weight after David died, but she couldn't bear to have it resized. It was one of the few tangible connections to their past life, to the love story that had given her Emma. The drive to Carson's diner took exactly 12 minutes in the old Honda Civic that had seen better days. Sarah's morning shift there from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., helped supplement her garage income. The regulars knew her by name, tipped well, and never complained when she looked a little worse for wear after a busy night at Pete's. Between orders of eggs over easy and endless coffee refills, Sarah's mind wandered to the night ahead. Pete had been talking about retiring soon, and though he assured her she'd always have a place at the garage, uncertainty gnawed at her stomach. She needed both jobs to make ends meet, to ensure Emma could have the opportunities she deserved. The weight of single motherhood sometimes felt overwhelming, but Sarah had learned to carry it with grace. Each time she caught a glimpse of her wedding ring while pouring coffee or changing oil, she remembered David's words from their last anniversary. "You're the strongest person I know, Sarah. Whatever life throws at us, you'll find a way through." He'd been right about that, even if he couldn't have known how soon she'd need to prove it. As her morning shift wound down, Sarah's thoughts turned to the night ahead at Pete's garage, unaware that fate had scheduled an appointment that would change everything. Pete's 24-hour garage sat at the intersection of Maple and 3rd, its weathered sign casting a familiar yellow glow across the empty parking lot. Sarah pulled into her usual spot at 10 p.m., the evening air carrying the first hint of autumn crispness. Inside, Pete was updating the service log, his reading glasses perched precariously on the end of his nose. "Right on time, as always," he greeted, sliding the thick logbook across the counter. Every car Sarah had ever worked on was recorded in those pages, each entry a testament to her growing expertise. "Mrs. Henderson's Buick is in Bay 2. Transmission's acting up again." Sarah smiled, already reaching for her toolbox. "Third time. This month. Have you tried convincing her to retire that car yet?" "Tried telling her last week," Pete chuckled, his steel-grey hair catching the fluorescent light. "She said she'd rather retire me first." The garage had been Sarah's sanctuary these past 5 years. During the day, it bustled with the usual traffic of oil changes and tire rotations, but the night shift belonged to her. Here, in the quiet hours between dusk and dawn, she could lose herself in the methodical work of fixing what was broken. Mrs. Henderson's Buick was a familiar challenge, one that Sarah tackled with practiced efficiency. As she worked, her mind wandered to Emma, probably finishing homework with Maria. These night hours were the hardest, missing bedtime stories and goodnight kisses, but they paid better than day shifts, and Pete trusted her to run things alone. The service log filled steadily as the night progressed. A delivery van with brake problems, a college student's ancient Volkswagen that needed a new alternator, a taxi driver's routine maintenance. Each entry written in Sarah's neat handwriting, each repair completed with the perfectionism David had instilled in her. "You've got his touch, you know," Pete had told her once, watching her diagnose a particularly tricky engine problem. David always said the engine would tell you what was wrong if you listened carefully enough. She'd learned to listen, to understand. The language of machines that had been her husband's passion. Around 2 a.m., the familiar lull settled over the garage. Sarah used the quiet time to organize tools and review inventory, the radio playing softly in the background. Kenny Rogers was singing about knowing when to hold 'em and when to fold 'em when she heard it, the distinctive purr of a high-performance engine, but with an underlying dissonance that made her mechanic's ears prick up. The sound grew louder, and through the garage's open bay doors, Sarah watched a midnight blue Aston Martin DB11 roll to a stop. Even with the obvious engine trouble, it was a magnificent machine. The kind of car she usually only saw in magazines or on TV, not in this working-class corner of town. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out, tall, distinguished, probably in his late 40s. His charcoal suit probably cost more than she made in 3 months, but there was something approachable in his bearing, a lack of the pretension she'd come to expect from wealthy clients. "Having trouble with your car?" Sarah asked, wiping her hands on a shop rag as she approached. The man ran a hand through his silver-flecked dark hair, looking both frustrated and amused. "You could say that. Started making an odd noise about 20 miles back, then the check engine light came on. I was hoping to make it home, but..." He gestured helplessly at the car. You made the right call stopping, Sarah said, already moving toward the car. Mind if I take a listen? He stepped aside with a graceful motion. Please, I'm Michael, by the way. Michael Bradford. Sarah Mitchell, she replied, opening the driver's door. The interior smelled of expensive leather and subtle cologne. She turned the key, and the engine's complaint became immediately apparent. How long has it been since your last service? About 3 months. My usual mechanic retired, and I haven't found one I trust yet. Sarah nodded, her mind already cataloguing possibilities. Let's get her inside and take a proper look. It might take a while. Are you okay waiting? Michael glanced at his watch, then at the dark road beyond the garage. Doesn't seem like I have much choice. Is there somewhere nearby I can get coffee? There's a pot in the office, Sarah offered. It's not fancy, but it's hot and fresh. Pete insists on good coffee. Says it's as essential as good tools. A genuine smile crossed Michael's face, transforming his features from merely handsome to something more compelling. Pete sounds like a wise man. Lead the way, Ms. Mitchell. Just Sarah, she corrected, guiding the Aston Martin into Bay 3. The car's silent grace, even in its troubled state, reminded her of the thoroughbred horses her grandfather used to train. Beautiful, powerful, and occasionally temperamental. As she began her diagnostic routine, Sarah was aware of Michael, watching from near Pete's coffee pot, his jacket now draped over a chair, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. Most clients either hovered too close, offering unhelpful suggestions, or disappeared to find somewhere more comfortable to wait. Michael did neither, maintaining a respectful distance while showing genuine interest in her work. The engine's story slowly revealed itself under her careful investigation. Sarah's hands moved with confident precision, each check and test bringing her closer to the root of the problem. It was the kind of diagnostic challenge she loved, requiring both technical knowledge and intuition. Found it, she announced finally, straightening up from under the hood. You've got a failing fuel injection system and a couple of sensors that need replacing. It's fixable, but it'll take a few hours. Michael nodded, seeming to appreciate her direct approach. Do what needs to be done. I trust you know what you're doing. Those words, spoken with simple sincerity, carried more weight than any elaborate praise. Sarah turned back to the car, hiding a small smile. Trust was something she'd learned to earn in this garage, one repair at a time. Each entry in Pete's service log was more than just a record. It was a promise kept, a problem solved, a little piece of order restored to someone's world. As she began the repairs, Sarah had no way of knowing that this particular entry would mark the beginning of a whole new chapter in her life. The night settled into a comfortable rhythm as Sarah worked on Michael's car. The garage's fluorescent lights cast long shadows across the concrete floor, and the familiar sense of motor oil and metal filled the air. From his perch near the coffee maker, Michael had loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, looking increasingly at ease in the working-class environment. You don't see many DB11s around here, Sarah commented as she carefully removed the faulty fuel injector. Her movements were precise, treating each component with the respect such a machine deserved. I should have listened when it first started making noise, Michael admitted, taking a sip of his coffee, but I was coming back from an important meeting, and sometimes I can be stubborn about admitting when I need help. Sarah's hands stilled for a moment, a small smile playing at her lips. Sounds like someone else I used to know. My late husband was the same way, could fix anyone's car but would drive his own until it practically fell apart. The words had slipped out naturally, surprising her. She rarely spoke about David to customers, but something about Michael's presence made conversation flow easily. He taught you the trade? Michael asked, his tone genuine rather than skeptical. Sarah nodded, resuming her work. 15 years together, most of them right here in this garage. Pete, the owner, he trained David, and David trained me. Said I had a better ear for engines than half the mechanics he knew. She paused, testing a connection. These newer models are different, though, more computer than car sometimes. That's what fascinates me about them. Michael said, moving closer to watch her work. The marriage of traditional engineering and modern technology, but I admit it all looks like a mystery to me. I can run a company, but I couldn't change my own oil to save my life. His self-deprecating honesty made Sarah chuckle. Everyone has their expertise. I couldn't run a company, but give me a troubled engine, and I'll figure out what's wrong. A company is just like an engine in many ways, Michael mused. Different parts working together, regular maintenance needed, and sometimes things break down unexpectedly. The principles aren't so different. Sarah glanced up, catching his eye. There was an intelligence there that went beyond business acumen, a genuine interest in understanding how things worked, whether mechanical or human. The conversation flowed naturally as she continued the repairs. Michael asked thoughtful questions about the garage, about her work, demonstrating an unexpected knowledge of small businesses and their challenges. In turn, Sarah found herself curious about his world, so different from her own. "So what kind of company do you run?" she asked, carefully installing the new fuel injector. "Bradford Industries. We're in technology and infrastructure development." He said it simply, without the ego she might have expected. "But lately, I've been thinking about branching into something more community-focused, something that makes a direct difference in people's lives." Sarah nodded, understanding the desire to create tangible impact. Every car she fixed was exactly that, a practical solution to someone's problem, a way to keep their life moving forward. As the night deepened, their conversation wandered through various topics. Michael spoke about growing up in a family that expected him to take over the business, about his decision to expand it in new directions. Sarah shared stories about the regular customers whose cars she maintained, about Pete's mentorship, about the satisfaction of solving mechanical puzzles. "Emma would love this car," Sarah mentioned offhandedly as she worked on the sensors. "She's 8, my daughter, already knows more about engines than most adults. Sometimes she sits in the garage with her homework, asking questions about everything. I'm doing." Something softened in Michael's expression at the mention of Emma. "Sounds like she takes after her mother." "She takes after both of us," Sarah replied, her voice warm with maternal pride. "As her father's curiosity and my stubbornness makes for an interesting combination." The repair progressed steadily, each step methodical and precise. Michael's presence became comfortable, natural, as if he'd always been part of the garage's late-night atmosphere. He told her about his own love of cars, not as a mechanic, but as someone who appreciated their beauty and engineering. "First car I ever bought myself was a beat-up Mustang," he recalled, leaning against a workbench. "Spent every penny I had on it. My father thought I was crazy, said I should have invested the money instead. But there was something about having something that was completely mine, that I chose for myself." Sarah understood that feeling perfectly. "Freedom," she said simply. "That's what cars represent for a lot of people. Freedom and possibility." The night had grown quiet outside, that peaceful time between midnight traffic and early morning commuters. Sarah's hands moved surely through the final adjustments, her wedding ring catching the light as she reached for a wrench. She noticed Michael's eyes follow the movement, taking in the simple silver band that had been with her through so much. "Almost finished," she announced, making one final check of the connections. "Want to hear how she sounds?" Michael straightened up, anticipation evident in his posture. Sarah turned the key, and the engine came to life with a smooth, powerful purr, all trace of its earlier distress gone. The sound filled the garage like music, a symphony of perfectly tuned mechanical parts working in harmony. "That's incredible," Michael said, genuine admiration in his voice. "You've done in a few hours what my last mechanic couldn't figure out in weeks." Sarah shut off the engine, satisfied with her work. "Sometimes you just need someone who'll listen to what the car is trying to tell you." She began cleaning her tools, preparing to document the repair in Pete's service log. You should be good to go now, but I'd recommend getting it fully serviced soon. I can give you some recommendations for shops that specialize in high-end vehicles. As she wrote up the service details, she was aware of Michael watching her, his expression thoughtful. The night was waning, hints of dawn beginning to color the eastern sky. Soon her shift would end, and she'd head to the diner for her morning job. But for now, in these quiet moments before daybreak, something unspoken hung in the air between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits despite their different worlds. The first hints of sunrise painted the sky in gentle watercolors as Sarah finished writing in the service log. Through the garage's open bay doors, the morning air carried the sweet scent of nearby flowering crab-apple trees. It was that magical hour when night reluctantly gave way to day, when anything seemed possible. Michael had insisted on paying well above her usual rate, which Sarah initially refused. "The posted rates are fair," she explained, but he shook his head. "Fair is relative," he said quietly. "You stayed late, did exceptional work, and saved me from being stranded. That's worth more than standard rates." As Sarah wrote him a receipt, the fluorescent lights caught her wedding ring again. This time, Michael's curiosity got the better of him. "That ring," he said softly. "It seems to have a story behind it." Sarah's hand stilled on the paper. Usually, she deflected such personal questions from customers, but this felt different. Maybe it was the liminal quality of the dawn hour, or the easy rapport they'd built during the repair, or simply the gentle way he'd asked. "It was David's last gift to me," she said, running her thumb over the worn silver band. "We couldn't afford much when we got married. We were both working in this garage then. On our 10th anniversary, he surprised me with a fancy diamond ring, but I kept wearing this one for work, didn't want to risk damaging the diamond." She paused, collecting her thoughts. "After the accident, I put the diamond ring away. This one feels more like us, like the life we built together." "Love isn't measured in carats," Michael observed, his voice gentle. "No," Sarah agreed. "It's measured in morning coffees and shared dreams and fixing each other's cars at midnight." She smiled slightly. "David used to say a good marriage is like a well-maintained engine. It's not about how shiny it looks, but how well it runs." Through the open bay doors they could see Emma approaching with Maria. It was their morning routine. Maria would walk Emma over to say goodbye before taking her to school. The little girl's backpack bounced with each step, her dark curls catching the early light. "Mommy!" Emma called out, then stopped short at the sight of the Aston Martin. "Wow! Is that a real DB11? Michael's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You know your cars, young lady? Mom and I look at car magazines together," Emma explained, circling the vehicle with evident appreciation. "The engine's a twin turbocharged V12, right?" "That's right," Michael smiled, clearly impressed. "Your mother just fixed it for me." "Mom can fix anything," Emma stated with absolute confidence, making Sarah's heart swell. Then she noticed the grease on Sarah's uniform. "You worked through your whole shift again, didn't you?" The concern in her daughter's voice made Sarah wince internally. Emma worried too much for an 8-year-old, always aware of how hard her mother worked to keep their life stable. "It's okay, sweetie. We needed to make sure Mr. Bradford's car was safe to drive." Maria stepped forward, her wise eyes taking in the scene. "Emma, why don't we get your breakfast ready? Let your mother finish up here." But before they could leave, Michael spoke up. "Actually, if you don't mind, I'd like to propose something." He turned to Sarah, his expression earnest. "I've been looking for an investment that would make a real difference in communities. What would you think about a chain of community garages?" Sarah blinked, unsure she'd heard correctly. "A chain of, garages that combine technical expertise with fair pricing and community service," Michael continued, warming to the topic. "Places that could offer apprenticeships, help people maintain their vehicles safely without breaking the bank, maybe even provide emergency repairs for families in need." He gestured around Pete's garage. "Places like this, but with more resources and support and I'd want you to manage them." Emma's eyes widened. "Mom, that would be amazing. You could help lots of people just like you and Dad always wanted to." Sarah's mind raced with possibilities and questions. "It's an interesting idea, but I know it's sudden," Michael acknowledged, "and there's a lot to discuss. But watching you work tonight, seeing how you approach problems, how you understand both the technical and human aspects of this business, it confirmed something I've been thinking about for a while." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, offering it to Sarah. "Take some time to think about it. Talk it over with Pete. I'm not looking for an immediate answer." The morning sun had fully crested the horizon now, filling the garage with golden light. Sarah looked at the card in her hand, then at her daughter's hopeful face, then at Michael's sincere expression. "Oh, and one more thing," Michael added, reaching for his phone. "I took the liberty of arranging something while you were finishing the repair." He showed her a photo of a new cargo van. "It's being delivered later today. For your business use, of course. Managing multiple locations will require reliable transportation." Sarah's protest died on her lips as Emma squealed with delight. "Our own van? Really? Consider it a down payment on our future partnership," Michael said smoothly. "No strings attached, even if you decide not to take me up on the larger offer." The gesture was overwhelming in its generosity, yet something in Michael's manner kept it from feeling like charity. He was offering an opportunity, not a handout, a chance to build something meaningful while maintaining her dignity. Maria, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. "The sun brings new beginnings, Mihicha. Sometimes we must be brave enough to accept them." Sarah looked down at her wedding ring, remembering David's words about finding a way through whatever life threw at her. The morning light caught the worn silver, making it glow like a beacon of possibility. "I'll think about it," she said finally, her voice steady. "And thank you for both the offer and the van." "Thank you," Michael replied warmly, "for reminding me what real expertise and dedication looked like." He glanced at his watch. "I should go, but I hope to hear from you soon." As his car purred out of the garage, Emma slipped her small hand into Sarah's. "Dad would be proud, you know. He always said you were the one who made things work." Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand, watching the Aston Martin disappear into the sunrise. The worn silver ring on her finger caught the light one more time, and for the first time in years, its presence felt less like an anchor to the past, and more like a bridge to the future. The morning sun had fully risen by the time Pete arrived at the garage, earlier than usual. Sarah had called him after Michael left, knowing her old friend would want to hear about the night's events. Now they sat in his cramped office, steam rising from fresh cups of coffee as Sarah recounted everything. "Community garages," Pete mused, removing his reading glasses to clean them thoughtfully. "David used to talk about something similar, remember? Wanted to make good mechanical work accessible to everyone." Sarah nodded, turning Michael's business card over in her hands. The elegant embossing caught the light. Michael Bradford, CEO, Bradford Industries. Simple, understated, yet speaking volumes about the resources behind his proposal. "It sounds too good to be true," Sarah admitted, voicing her main concern. "And the van? I mean, who does that?" Pete leaned back in his creaking chair, a knowing smile crossing his weathered face. "Someone who recognizes capability when they see it." "Sarah, I've been meaning to talk to you about something anyway." He pulled out a folder from his desk drawer. "These are the garage's ownership papers. I'm retiring at the end of the year." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "Pete, no. Yes," he said firmly. "These old bones need rest. I've been holding on mainly because I worried about you and Emma. But this Bradford fellow, I looked him up this morning. He's got a solid reputation, known for ethical business practices and community investment. Maybe this is the answer we've both been waiting for." Before Sarah could respond, the rumble of a diesel engine drew their attention. Through the office window, they watched a brand-new Ford Transit van pull into the lot, gleaming white in the morning sun. Speaking of answers, Pete chuckled. Sarah stepped out to meet the delivery driver, her mind spinning. The van was perfect, spacious enough for tools and parts, professional looking without being flashy. As she signed the delivery papers, she noticed Emma's school art project had fallen from her backpack earlier. Picking it up, her throat tightened with emotion. Emma had drawn their family. Sarah in her mechanic's uniform, Emma holding a wrench, and above them, a smiling figure with angel wings wearing coveralls, David watching over them. But she'd also drawn something else. A row of buildings that looked like garages, with happy people standing outside them. She must have been drawing while we were talking to Michael, Sarah murmured, touching the crayon figures gently. Pete appeared at her shoulder, looking at the drawing. Kids have a way of seeing possibilities before we do. He pressed the garage's ownership papers into her hands. Take these home. Read them over. Whatever you decide about Bradford's offer, this place is yours if you want it. David would have wanted that. Sarah drove home in the new van, its pristine interior smelling of possibility. Emma's art project sat on the passenger seat, its simple drawings somehow making the morning's events feel more real, more right. At home, Maria was waiting with breakfast, and that knowing smile that suggested she'd already guessed what Sarah was thinking. The van is beautiful, she said, setting down a plate of eggs, but the look in your eyes is even better. I haven't seen that spark since before David's accident. Sarah sank into a kitchen chair, suddenly exhausted, but oddly energized. I'm scared, Maria, starting over, taking risks. It's been just Emma and me for so long. Scared is good, Maria replied, her accent thickening with emotion. Scared means you're growing, and you're not alone, mihija. You have me, Pete. And now, maybe someone new, who sees what we've all seen in you for years. Sarah's hand went to her wedding ring, its familiar texture comforting. For the first time, she allowed herself to seriously consider Michael's dinner invitation, which he'd casually mentioned before leaving. Not as a business meeting, but as something more personal. What would David think? She wondered aloud. Maria's answer was immediate and firm. He would think it's time for his girls to spread their wings. Now, eat your breakfast. You have decisions to make and a date to prepare for. I haven't said yes to dinner yet, Sarah protested weakly. No, Maria agreed with a knowing smile, but you will. The Riverside Grill was upscale, without being pretentious. Exactly the kind of place Michael would choose, Sarah realized. Through the restaurant's windows, the city lights reflected off the river like scattered stars. She smoothed her dark blue dress, a long unused garment Maria had insisted she wear. Mrs. Mitchell? The maître d' approached with a warm smile. Mr. Bradford is waiting for you at the corner table. Michael stood as she approached, and Sarah noticed he'd chosen to dress down slightly, a sport coat rather than a full suit, making her feel more at ease about her own attire. His smile was genuine, appreciative but respectful. You look lovely, he said simply, pulling out her chair. I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of ordering a bottle of wine. The owner here makes his own. Nothing fancy, but quite good. That sounds perfect, Sarah replied, settling into her chair. Emma's with Maria for the evening. She made me promise to ask you more about the community garage idea. Michael laughed softly. Your daughter has good business instincts, but maybe we could start with something else. I'd like to know more about Sarah the person, not just Sarah the mechanic. The wine arrived, a rich red that tasted of blackberries and autumn. As they studied their menus, the conversation flowed naturally, picking up where they'd left off in the garage, but moving into more personal territory. What made you choose mechanical work? Michael asked after they'd ordered. Sarah took a sip. Of wine, considering. I didn't really, at least not at first. I fell in love with a mechanic, and he shared his passion with me. But over time, I discovered I had a talent for it. There's something deeply satisfying about fixing things, about making something work that was broken. I understand that feeling, Michael nodded. Though in my case, it's about fixing broken systems, making organizations work better. Not quite as hands-on as your work. I don't know about that, Sarah mused. Earlier you compared companies to engines. Maybe we're not so different, just working with different kinds of machinery. Their entrees arrived. Grilled salmon for her, steak for him. The food was excellent, but Sarah found herself more engaged in the conversation. Michael told her about growing up in his family's business, about the pressure to follow a predetermined path, and his eventual decision to reshape the company according to his own values. That couldn't have been easy, Sarah observed. Going against family expectations. No, but necessary. Like you choosing to keep working after David's accident, even though I'm sure plenty of people had other suggestions. Sarah nodded, appreciating his insight. Everyone had opinions, but Emma needed stability, not just financial support. She needed to see that life goes on, that we keep working and building even after loss. The evening deepened around them, their corner table creating an intimate atmosphere that made conversation feel natural and unforced. They discussed books they'd read, places they'd traveled, the challenges of balancing work and personal life. Michael spoke about his divorce years ago, his realization that success meant nothing without purpose. That's partly why your work at the garage caught my attention, he admitted. You've created something meaningful there. Not just repairs, but real connections with people. That's what I want these community garages to be about. Sarah found herself sharing her own dreams, ideas she'd had over the years, for expanding the garage's services. David and I used to talk about offering basic car maintenance classes, helping people understand their vehicles better. Pete liked the idea, but never had the resources. Resources we could provide, Michael noted, his eyes lighting up, along with job training programs, apprenticeships, emergency repair funds for families in crisis, Sarah added, caught up in the possibility. They barely noticed when dessert arrived, a shared chocolate soufflé that they talked over until it grew cold. The restaurant had nearly emptied around them, but their conversation showed no signs of slowing. I should get home, Sarah said finally, noting the time. Emma will want to hear all about the business meeting. Michael smiled, understanding. Her gentle deflection. Of course. Though I hope we can do this again. Perhaps something more casual next time. I know a great pizza place Emma might enjoy. Sarah found herself returning his smile, her wedding ring catching the candlelight as she reached for her purse. I think we'd both like that. In that moment, she realized the evening had managed to be both exactly and nothing like what she'd expected, much like the man sitting across from her. The following weeks brought a flurry of activity to Pete's garage. Michael became a regular presence, often arriving with blueprints and proposals, but just as often bringing pizza and staying to help Emma with her math homework. The old office became their planning center, its walls now covered with maps, marking potential locations for the community garage chain. We'll start with 3 locations, Michael explained one evening, as Emma colored careful stars on their planning map. Pete's will be our flagship. We'll modernize the equipment but keep its character. Then 2 new sites in neighborhoods that need affordable, reliable service. Sarah studied the proposed layout he'd brought, appreciating how he'd incorporated her suggestions about workspace flow and customer areas. You've included the training room I mentioned, and space for childcare, Michael added, pointing to a corner of the blueprint. If we want single parents to take advantage of our job training programs, they'll need support. The autumn air grew crisp as their plans took shape. Pete watched it all with quiet satisfaction, occasionally offering wisdom from his decades of experience. But it was Emma who proved to be their most enthusiastic consultant, her childhood perspective cutting through adult complications to simple truths. If you put the waiting room here, she said one day, pointing to the blueprint, people can watch their cars being fixed. Mum says understanding your car makes you take better care of it. Michael's eyes met Sarah's over their daughter's head, both noting her use of their cars, the mechanic's daughter already thinking like a community servant. The moment held something deeper, a recognition of how naturally their lives were beginning to interweave. On a sunny Saturday morning, Michael brought his Aston Martin back to the garage, but not for repairs. Emma mentioned wanting to learn more about high-performance engines, he explained. I thought this might make a good teaching opportunity. Sarah watched as Michael patiently answered Emma's endless questions, his expensive suit forgotten as he knelt beside her to point out engine components. Her daughter's eyes shone with the same enthusiasm she'd had when David would teach her, and for the first time, that memory brought more warmth than pain. He's good with her, Pete observed quietly, standing beside Sarah. And he looks at you the same way David used to, like he can't quite believe his luck. Pete, Sarah started, but he raised a hand. I know, you're focused on the business partnership, but Sarah, happiness doesn't always announce itself with trumpets. Sometimes it just quietly pulls up to your garage with engine trouble. The work brought them together naturally, their different perspectives creating something stronger than either could have built alone. Michael's business acumen complemented Sarah's practical experience, while her community connections helped shape his corporate vision into something more personal. One evening, after Emma had gone home with Maria, they sat among the blueprints and planning documents, sharing coffee and comfortable silence. Michael rolled up his sleeves, revealing ink stains from their afternoon of note-taking. You know, he said thoughtfully, when I first brought my car here that night, I was focused on fixing my business image. Community investment, social responsibility, all the right corporate buzzwords. He smiled ruefully. I never expected to find something genuine instead. Sarah looked up from the training program outline she was reviewing. Having second thoughts? The opposite, he replied. For the first time in years, I'm absolutely certain about a business decision. This isn't just about garages or cars anymore. It's about building something that matters. His hand rested near hers on the desk, not quite touching but close enough to feel the warmth. Sarah's wedding ring caught the light, but now it felt less like a barrier and more like a bridge between past and present. Emma asked me something interesting today, she said softly. She wanted to know if it was okay to be happy about new things while still missing what we lost. Michael's expression held understanding and patience. What did you tell her? That love multiplies. It doesn't divide. That David would want us to build new dreams. Sarah met his eyes steadily. That sometimes the best way to honor the past is to embrace the future it made possible. The evening light filtered through the garage windows, casting long shadows across their shared plans, while outside, the new van gleamed in the parking lot, a symbol of chances taken and trust given, one careful step at a time. The morning headline in the business section of the city newspaper caught Sarah off guard. Bradford Industries CEO's latest venture, romance with local mechanic. Below was a grainy photo of her and Michael at the Riverside Grill, heads bent. Close over what had actually been garage blueprints, but the image suggested something more intimate. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she read the article. It painted their partnership in sensational terms. The wealthy businessman and the working-class widow, speculation about Michael's real motivations for the community garage project, even mentions of Emma. The reporter had done their research, dredging up details about David's accident and Sarah's subsequent financial struggles. The diner's morning regulars tried to hide their curious glances as she served coffee, the newspaper, passing from table to table. By mid-morning, her phone was buzzing with messages from old friends and distant relatives, all suddenly interested in her new life. Don't let it bother you, Pete advised when she arrived at the garage, tossing the newspaper in the recycling. Papers need to sell copies. Tomorrow they'll find something else to write about. But it wasn't that simple. When Emma came home from school that afternoon, her eyes were red. Some kids said Mom's only pretending to like fixing cars to get Mr. Bradford's money, she reported quietly. They said their parents were talking about it. Sarah pulled her daughter close, anger and protective instinct warring in her chest. You know that's not true, sweetheart. We've been fixing cars since before you were born. I know, Emma sniffled. I told them about Dad teaching you, and about Pete, and how Mr. Bradford came to us because you're the best mechanic. But Jason, Miller said his mom says it's like a movie where the rich person saves the poor family. Before Sarah could respond, the garage's phone rang. It was Michael's assistant, her tone professionally apologetic. Mr. Bradford needs to reschedule this evening's planning meeting. Some board members have requested an emergency discussion about the community garage project. Sarah's heart sank, but she kept her voice steady. Of course. I understand. Later that night, after Emma was asleep, Sarah sat at her small kitchen table, staring at the business plans spread before her. The newspaper lay nearby, its headlines seeming to mock her dreams of building something meaningful. A gentle knock at the door startled her. Michael stood there, looking tired but determined. "I'm sorry about today," he said without preamble. "The board, they're concerned about perception. They think the garage project might seem like a personal indulgence rather than a serious business venture." "Because of me," Sarah said quietly. "Because they don't understand yet. But they will." He ran a hand through his silver-streaked hair. "I've spent years playing by their rules, building what they consider success. But this project, what we're creating here, this is real success, making a difference in people's lives." Sarah touched the newspaper. "And this? The speculation about us." Michael's expression softened. "That's real too, isn't it? Not the way they're writing it, but this connection between us. I'm not here just for the garages, Sarah. I think you know that." "It's complicated," she whispered, her wedding ring suddenly feeling heavy on her finger. "Life usually is." He stepped closer, not touching her, but present, solid. "The board will come around once they see the business model. The press will find new stories. But I won't back away from this, from the project, or from you and Emma, unless you ask me to." The night air carried the scent of approaching rain through the open door. Sarah thought about Emma's tears, about the whispers at the diner, about the years she'd spent building a life from the wreckage of loss. She thought about David, about his dreams for the garage, about his belief in her strength. "I don't want you to back away," she said finally, "but I need to know this isn't going to hurt Emma. She's been through enough. We'll protect her," Michael promised, "together, and we'll build something she can be proud of, not just garages, but a legacy of helping people, of making things better." Thunder rumbled in the distance as they stood in her doorway, the space between them filled with unspoken words and careful hope. The newspaper's harsh headlines seemed less important now, overshadowed by the quiet certainty of two people choosing to face complications together, one step at a time. Emma's diary lay open on her desk, colored pencil drawings decorating the margins. "Dear Diary," she had written, "today Mom and Mr. Bradford took me to his company's office. It was super tall and fancy, but his office had pictures of cars everywhere. He let me help present our garage project to some important people. Mom looked nervous at first, but then she started talking about helping families, and everyone listened. The presentation to Bradford Industries board had been Michael's idea. Let them see what this project really means, he'd suggested. Not through business reports, but through the people it will help." Sarah had agreed, though her hands shook slightly as she straightened Emma's collar before entering the boardroom. But her daughter's presence proved transformative. Emma's earnest explanations of how cars connected families, her stories about watching her parents help people at Pete's garage, and her excited descriptions of the training programs they were planning, it humanized the entire project. "Out of the mouths of babes," one board member had murmured, visibly moved. Another mentioned his own humble beginnings, working in his uncle's repair shop to pay for college. The whispers at school began to change too. Emma proudly showed her friends the architectural drawings for the new garages, explaining how they would help people learn useful skills. "My mom's going to teach some of the classes," she told them, "and Mr. Bradford says maybe we can start a program for kids to learn basic car care." Sarah watched her daughter blossom under the positive attention, her initial tears replaced by enthusiasm for their growing project. In her diary, Emma drew pictures of the future garages, adding details she remembered from the blueprints, sometimes sketching herself helping younger children learn about cars. Michael handled the media with practiced grace, transforming their narrative from gossip to inspiration. He invited local reporters to tour Pete's garage, letting them see the real work being done, the genuine relationships being built. Sarah found her footing in these interviews too, speaking passionately about their vision for accessible automotive education and community support. "You're a natural," Michael told her after one particularly successful interview. "You speak from the heart, and people respond to that." They settled into a new rhythm, finding ways to balance their growing personal relationship with their professional goals. Michael joined them for family dinners at Sarah's apartment, where Emma would proudly help Maria cook. He brought books about cars for Emma, sat with her while she did homework, and listened to her ideas about the garage project with genuine interest. One evening, as they cleaned up after dinner, Maria pulled Sarah aside. "He treats Emma's dreams as seriously as his own business plans," she observed. "That tells you everything about his heart." The community began to embrace their vision. Local business owners offered partnerships, schools expressed interest in automotive education programs, and social services agencies saw the potential for job training opportunities. The project grew beyond just garage repairs into a true community resource. Pete watched it all with quiet satisfaction. "Sometimes," he told Sarah, "the right people come into our lives at exactly the right moment. David brought you to the garage when it needed fresh energy. Now Michael's helping us take that energy to a whole new level." Sarah found herself keeping her own diary of sorts. Not in words, but in small moments. The way Michael's eyes lit up when Emma mastered a new concept, the gentle way he'd touch her arm when sharing an idea, the hours he spent with Pete, absorbing decades of wisdom about running a community-focused business. Her wedding ring remained on her finger, but its meaning had evolved. It was no longer just a memorial to what she'd lost, but a reminder of how love could build foundations for new beginnings. David had taught her to fix cars. That knowledge had sustained her through grief and now was helping her build a future she never could have imagined. "Mom," Emma said one night, closing her diary, "I wrote something about Dad today. I wrote that he'd be happy we're helping so many people learn about cars, just like he helped you learn." Sarah hugged her daughter, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "He would be, sweetheart. And you know what else? He'd be so proud of how you're helping make it happen." Outside, the lights of the city twinkled like stars, while inside their cozy apartment, surrounded by blueprints and Emma's drawings and the warmth of shared dreams, they were building something new, not to replace what was lost, but to honor it by growing beyond it. The manila envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by courier to Pete's garage. Inside, Sarah found legal documents bearing Bradford Industries' letterhead, but they weren't the partnership agreements they'd been expecting. Instead, she discovered something that made her blood run cold. 5 years ago, Bradford Industries had acquired a chain of luxury car service centers, then systematically closed them, putting dozens of independent garages out of business. Her hands trembled. As she read further, the closures had been strategic, making way for high-end dealership service centers. Hundreds of mechanics had lost their livelihoods. The document included newspaper clippings, employee testimonials, and court records from the subsequent lawsuits. An anonymous note was paperclipped to the front. "Before you trust Michael Bradford with your future, remember how many futures he's destroyed. Ask him about Operation Clockwork." Sarah sat heavily in Pete's old office chair, her mind racing. The Michael she knew, the man who spent hours helping Emma with her science project, who brought coffee to their early morning planning sessions, who spoke passionately about community service, seemed impossible to reconcile with these cold business decisions. The bell above the garage door chimed. "Mom," Emma's voice carried through the garage, "Mr. Bradford's taking us for ice cream after my dentist appointment, remember?" Sarah quickly tucked the envelope into her desk drawer, but not before Emma caught the troubled look on her face. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, sweetie, just some complicated paperwork." She managed to smile. "Why don't you go wait in the van? I need to talk to Mr. Bradford for a minute." Michael stood in the doorway, his familiar warm smile fading as he read her expression. "Sarah, what is it?" She waited until Emma was out of earshot. "We need to talk about Operation Clockwork." The color drained from his face. For a moment, he looked older, wearier. "Where did you hear about that? Does it matter?" "What matters is you never mentioned it. All those independent garages, Michael, all those people who lost their jobs." Her voice cracked. "Is that what this is really about? Getting ahead of the competition by pretending to help the community?" "No," he said firmly. "Sarah, that situation was completely different." "Different how?" She pulled out the envelope, spreading the documents across her desk. "Because these people weren't fortunate enough to catch your attention? Because they didn't have cute daughters to make your board meetings more sympathetic?" Pain flashed across his face. "That's not fair. What I feel for you and Emma has nothing to do with, doesn't it?" Sarah's hand went to her wedding ring, twisting it anxiously. "The timing seems pretty convenient. Bradford Industries needs a PR boost, and suddenly you're interested in community garages, in a widow and her daughter." "Stop!" Michael's voice was quiet but intense. "You can question my business decisions, but don't question what I feel for you and Emma. That's real. What we're building here is real." The autumn wind rattled the garage windows, and Sarah could hear Emma humming to herself outside, waiting innocently for their ice cream trip. The sound made her heart ache. "I need time," she said finally. "Time to think about all this. And I need the whole truth, Michael. No more surprises." He nodded slowly. "Operation Clockwork was one of the worst decisions of my life. Not because it wasn't profitable, it was, but because I let myself be convinced that business success justified any means." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as signaling deep distress. "It's why I started looking for a different way to do things, why meeting you that night meant so much." "Pretty words," Sarah said quietly. "But how do I know they're true? Because I've spent 5 years trying to make it right." He pulled out his phone, quickly finding a file. "Those luxury service centers, I've been buying them back one by one, converting them into training facilities, hiring back the mechanics we displaced, creating apprenticeship programs." He handed her the phone. "It's not public knowledge yet. The board thinks it's just smart business diversification. But this project with you, it's the culmination of everything I've been working toward." Sarah looked at the documentation on his phone. Purchase agreements, hiring records, training program outlines. The dates stretched back years before he'd met her. "Why keep it secret?" she asked, her anger beginning to mix with confusion. Pride, at first. Shame. Then it just seemed easier to focus on moving forward rather than explaining past mistakes. He sighed heavily. "I should have told you everything from the beginning. You deserve better than finding out like this." Outside, Emma tapped on the garage window, pointing at her watch with exaggerated impatience. The gesture was so innocent, so removed from the complexity of adult mistakes and redemption. "I meant what I said," Sarah said finally. "I need time, and I need to know who sent these documents. Someone obviously wants to stop what we're doing here." Michael nodded. "I have my suspicions. The timing isn't accidental. We're about to announce the first wave of community garage openings. Someone stands to lose a lot of money when we start offering affordable services and training. The dealership chains? Among others. Sarah, I know I've given you reason to doubt me, but please believe this. Everything we've planned, everything we're building, it's about making things right, not just for my conscience, but for all the people who deserve a chance to learn, to work, to build their own futures." The weight of the document seemed to press down on Sarah's desk. 5 years of business decisions and their human consequences, laid bare. Through the window she could see Emma drawing patterns in the dirt with her shoe, waiting for two adults she trusted to take her for ice cream. "Go ahead with Emma," Sarah said finally. "She shouldn't have to deal with adult problems. I'll call you later." As she watched them drive away, her daughter chattering animatedly to a man who was either a calculating businessman or a genuine friend seeking redemption, Sarah felt the full weight of uncertainty settle over her. The garage seemed suddenly emptier, the familiar tools and equipment offering no answers to her questions. She picked up the anonymous note again, studying the typing, looking for clues. Whoever had sent this wanted to drive a wedge between her and Michael, wanted to stop their project, but why? And more importantly, what did it mean for their future? Not just the business partnership, but the delicate personal bonds they'd been forming. Sarah's wedding ring caught the light as she reached for her phone to call Pete. She needed his wisdom now, more than ever, needed to understand how to protect both her daughter's heart and their shared dreams for the community garages. The ring reminded her that she'd survived loss before, had rebuilt from ashes, but it also reminded her that sometimes love required courage, not just to move on, but to believe in the possibility of redemption. Late that night, after Emma had gone to bed, still chattering about her ice cream adventure with Michael, Sarah sat at her kitchen table writing in her journal. The familiar act of putting thoughts to paper had always helped her find clarity, even in the darkest days after David's death. "The hardest part," she wrote, "isn't the business implications. It's seeing Emma's face light up when she talks about him, knowing she's already let him into her heart. How do I protect her while being fair to everyone, including Michael?" Pete had listened quietly to everything earlier that evening, examining the documents with his reading glasses perched on his nose. His response had been characteristically measured. "People can change, Sarah. The question is whether they want to badly enough to do the hard work." The evidence of Michael's secret redemption project sat before her. Printouts of the training programs he'd established, the rehiring initiatives, the careful groundwork laid years before he'd met her. It would have been easier to dismiss him if these were recent actions, a hasty attempt to cover past sins. But 5 years of quiet effort told a different story. Maria had offered her own perspective while helping clean up after Emma's bedtime. "Me, Hisha, in my 70 years, I've learned that good people sometimes make terrible mistakes. The measure of a person isn't in never falling, but in how they choose to rise." A text message lit up Sarah's phone. "Emma forgot her science notebook in my car. I can drop it by the garage tomorrow or have my assistant deliver it if you prefer. Whatever makes you comfortable." The consideration in those words, the respect for her need for space, made Sarah's heart ache. She found herself remembering countless small moments, Michael teaching Emma about engine timing with infinite patience, his genuine interest in Pete's stories about the garage's history, the way he'd immediately understood why she kept wearing David's ring. Her journal entry continued. "David always said people are like engines, complex systems where everything affects everything else. One broken part doesn't always mean the whole machine is worthless. Sometimes it just means someone needs to care enough to fix it." Emma's diary lay on the counter where she'd left it after showing Sarah her latest entry. The page was filled with drawings of their future garages, with stick figures of all of them working together. Sarah teaching classes, Michael helping students, Emma assisting Pete. In her 8-year-old wisdom, she'd created a future where past and present coexisted peacefully. Sarah picked up her phone again, this time to look at recent photos. There was Emma proudly holding up the model engine she and Michael had built together. Michael and Pete poring over old service records, sharing knowledge across generations. The three of them at the diner, Emma's face lit with laughter at some silly joke Michael had told. "The truth is," she wrote in her journal, "I'm not just afraid of being wrong about him. I'm afraid of being right, of having found someone who understands both who I was and who I'm becoming." The anonymous note lay on the table, its threatening presence diminished somehow by the evidence of life and love surrounding it. Whoever had sent it hadn't counted on the strength of the bonds already formed, hadn't understood that their project was about more than just business. Sarah touched her wedding ring, its familiar texture grounding her. "David," she whispered to the quiet kitchen, "I could use some of your wisdom right now." As if in answer, her eyes fell on their old family photo album. Inside was a picture she hadn't looked at in years. David working on his first major repair at Pete's garage, his face showing the same mixture of determination and hope she'd seen in Michael's eyes when he talked about making things right. She picked up her phone one last time, typing carefully, "The garage at 8 tomorrow morning. Bring coffee and the whole truth. We'll talk." Emma's soft snoring drifted from the next room, a reminder that every decision she made affected not just her own heart, but her daughter's as well. Yet as she closed her journal and prepared for bed, Sarah felt a growing sense of peace. The path forward wasn't clear yet, but she knew one thing: running away from difficulty had never been her style. David had taught her to face mechanical problems head-on, and life deserved the same honest approach. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight she had taken the first step, choosing to listen, to understand, to give space for redemption, while holding firm to her principles. It was, she realized, exactly what she hoped Emma would learn to do when facing her own complex decisions someday. The early morning light filtered through Pete's garage windows, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. 2 cups of coffee sat on the workbench, steam rising in the cool air. Michael had arrived exactly at 8, carrying not just coffee, but a thick folder of documents, the complete history of Operation Clockwork and its aftermath. "Start at the beginning," Sarah said quietly. "No omissions." For the next hour, Michael laid bare the story behind the business decisions that had haunted him for 5 years. He spoke about board pressure, market analysis reports that reduced human lives to statistics, and the moment he realized what they'd actually done to people's livelihoods. The turning point, he explained, pulling out a newspaper clipping, was this man. "James Chen, third-generation mechanic, lost his family's shop because of us. I met him by chance 6 months after the closures. He was working as a night security guard, trying to support his kids." Sarah studied the faded photograph, a middle-aged Asian man standing proudly in front of his former garage. "What happened to him? He runs our first training center now, helped design the apprenticeship program. Everything we're planning here, we tested it there first, refined it based on his insights." Michael's voice softened. "When you talked about making mechanical knowledge accessible to everyone, you sounded just like him." As if on cue, the garage phone rang. It was a young mother with a broken-down car, 3 kids in the back seat, worried about making it to work. Without discussion, Sarah and Michael moved into action together, she grabbing her tools while he arranged for a local rideshare to get the family to their destination. Working side by side to diagnose the woman's car, their professional rhythm remained unchanged despite the weight of their earlier conversation. When the mother tried to work out a payment plan, Michael quietly covered the bill while Sarah explained. "Basic maintenance tips to help prevent future problems. That's why I believe in you," Sarah said after the family left. "Not the money part, the way you understood immediately that she needed more than just a repair. She needed knowledge, respect, a way forward." "I learned that lesson the hard way," Michael admitted. "Success isn't just about bottom lines. It's about lifting people up, giving them tools to succeed on their own terms." A community impact report lay open on the workbench, showing the results of their first training center. Employment rates, salary increases, new businesses started by program graduates. The numbers told a story of genuine transformation. "What about the anonymous note?" Sarah asked. "Any idea who's trying to stop us?" Michael nodded grimly. "We've traced it to a lobbying group funded by several major dealership chains. They're worried about what will happen when people have access to affordable repairs and proper automotive education. Pete's already had calls trying to convince him not to sell. Pete would never sell to them. No, but they'll keep trying. This project threatens their whole business model. We're not just opening garages. We're creating independence, building community strength. Sarah picked up a wrench. It's familiar. Weight grounding her. So we keep going. But this time completely in the open. No more hidden stories. No more secrets. Agreed. Michael's relief was visible. I'd like to start by introducing you to James Chen. He's been asking to meet the mechanic who inspired the expansion of his training program. The morning sun had fully risen now, filling the garage with clear light. Sarah's wedding ring gleamed as she reached for the community impact report, adding it to their growing collection of planning documents. Emma has a science presentation next week, she said, about simple machines and how they help people. She wanted to use our community garage project as her example. Michael understood the implicit permission in her words. I'll be there if you both want me to be. We do. Sarah met his eyes. But Michael, this is your last chance. Everything from here on out has to be built on truth. I know. He gestured to the mother's repaired car. That's what I want to build. Truth, trust, and real help for people who need it. The kind of legacy Emma can be proud of someday. Outside, Pete's truck pulled into the parking lot. He'd been meeting with their first group of potential instructors, experienced mechanics who'd lost their own shops over the years and were eager to pass on their knowledge. Sarah watched through the window as Pete walked toward the garage, his own legacy about to expand in ways he'd never imagined. The morning's first customers would be arriving soon, each bringing their own stories, their own needs for both mechanical expertise and human understanding. All right then, she said, picking up her toolbox. Let's get to work. We've got a lot of futures to fix. The house blueprints spread across Michael's dining room table were nothing like the sleek modern mansions Sarah had imagined he'd prefer. Instead, they showed a renovated craftsman-style home with a detached 3-car garage that could double as a workshop. Emma sat cross-legged on a chair, adding her own artistic touches to the plans while the adults discussed details. The previous owner was a woodworker, Michael explained, pointing to the garage. Already has excellent ventilation and workspace setup, perfect for weekend projects or teaching Emma about engines in a safe environment. And the garden? Sarah asked, noting the extensive backyard plans. Maria's influence. She insisted any proper family home needs space for growing things. He smiled at Emma. Think you could help your abuela with her tomatoes? Emma beamed at hearing him use the Spanish term for grandmother, which Maria had begun encouraging weeks ago. She promised to teach me about her special herbs too. The past month had brought changes both subtle and significant. The first community garage was under construction, with James Chen supervising the installation of state-of-the-art equipment alongside the practical tools that had served Pete's garage so well over the years. The training program had a waiting list hundreds of names long, and 3 more locations were already in the planning stages, but it was the personal changes that meant the most. Emma's science presentation had been a triumph, with Michael sitting proudly beside Sarah in the audience as their daughter explained how mechanics could help build stronger communities. The photo of that moment now sat framed in Pete's office, next to the old picture of David teaching Sarah her first repair. What do you think about this room? Michael asked, pointing to a space near the kitchen. Sarah followed his finger to the blueprint and caught her breath. The plans labeled it as a memory room. I thought. He hesitated, suddenly uncertain. We could display David's tools there, maybe some photos. A place where he's still part of the family story. But if it's not appropriate... Sarah reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. It's perfect, she whispered, watching Emma add her own decorative touches to the room on the blueprint, drawings of wrenches and family photos she wanted to include. The doorbell interrupted their planning session. James Chen stood on the porch holding a thick folder of training materials. "Sorry to interrupt family time," he said, his eyes twinkling at Emma's enthusiastic wave, "but I wanted to show you the updated curriculum." They gathered around the dining table, blueprints, making way for course outlines and teaching schedules. James had integrated suggestions from local vocational schools, creating pathways for students to earn certified credentials alongside their practical training. "We're not just teaching repairs," he explained, his passion evident. "We're teaching business skills, customer service, environmental responsibility, everything I wish I'd known when running my own shop." Emma listened intently, occasionally adding her own suggestions from a child's perspective. "Could we have special classes for kids?" she asked, "so we can learn basic stuff and safety first?" James's face lit up. "That's brilliant! A junior mechanic program. We could partner with schools, maybe create a summer camp." Sarah watched the excitement build as ideas flowed freely. This was what Michael's redemption had created. Not just making amends for past mistakes, but building something new and vital that would grow beyond any of them. Later that evening, after James had left with pages of notes about the junior mechanic program and Emma had gone to help Maria with dinner, Sarah and Michael stood in the backyard of what would become their home. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the promise of change. "Pete called today," Sarah said, her hand finding Michael's. "He wants to officially announce his retirement at the opening of the first new garage. Said it's time to let the next generation take over." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "He's built quite a legacy, both in you and in what the garage has meant to the community." "We're building on that legacy," Sarah replied, her wedding ring catching the last rays of sunlight. "Not replacing it, but growing it into something bigger than any of us imagined." The sound of Emma's laughter drifted from the kitchen, mixed with Maria's gentle Spanish instructions about proper seasoning. The foundation of their new home would be poured next week, but the real foundation, the one built of love, trust, and shared purpose, was already solid beneath their feet. "David would have loved this place," Sarah said softly, surveying what would become their garden. "He always said a home needs three things: room to work, room to grow, and room to remember." Michael's arm slipped around her waist. "Then we'll make sure it has all three. For all of us." The emergency room bracelet felt stark and wrong on Pete's wrist. Its harsh white plastic, a stark contrast to the oil-stained hands that had guided so many lives. Sarah sat beside his hospital bed, her own hands clutching his weathered fingers, while the steady beep of monitors marked time in the quiet room. It had happened during the final inspection of the first community garage. Pete had been showing Emma his old service logs, explaining how they'd tracked the new program's progress, when he'd suddenly pressed a hand to his chest and sat down heavily on a nearby stool. "Just heartburn," he'd insisted, but Sarah had recognized the signs from the mandatory first aid classes she'd taken after David's accident. Michael, thankfully, had already been dialing 911 while she helped Pete lie down. Now, 12 hours later, the doctors were using phrases like mild heart attack and warning sign and lifestyle changes. Pete listened with uncharacteristic quietness, his usual jovial demeanor subdued by the gravity of the situation. "The garage opening," he muttered, trying to sit up. "It's in 3 days. You need to rest." Sarah interrupted firmly, gently pushing him back against the pillows. "The garage will wait. You're more important." Michael stood in the doorway, having just returned from taking Emma home to Maria. His tie was loosened, silver hair slightly disheveled from running his hands through it in worry. "Everything's under control, Pete. James is handling the final preparations, and all your notes are being followed to the letter." Pete relaxed slightly, but his eyes remained troubled. "My speech for the retirement announcement will be even better after you've had time to recover," Sarah assured him. "The community will understand. They love you too much to want you risking your health." A nurse entered with medication, checking Pete's vitals with practiced efficiency. She smiled at the visitor badges Sarah and Michael wore. "Family?" "Yes," they answered simultaneously. and Sarah felt Michael's hand slip supportively into hers. Later that night, after Pete had fallen asleep, they stood in the hospital corridor, both physically and emotionally drained. "I don't want him to be alone tonight," Sarah said, even as exhaustion crept into her voice. "I'll stay," Michael offered. "You need to be there when Emma wakes up. She was pretty scared." Sarah nodded gratefully, remembering her daughter's tears as the ambulance had pulled away. She's never seen someone she loves in medical danger before. Not since David," Michael finished softly. "I know, but Pete's going to be okay. We caught it early, and he's strong." The word "we" caught Sarah's attention. 6 months ago, Pete had been just another small garage owner to Michael. Now he was family, the grandfather figure who had not only blessed their union, but had helped shape it through his wisdom and example. "Thank you," she whispered, leaning into Michael's embrace, "for being here, for helping so quickly today." "Where else would I be?" He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "This is what family does. Pete taught me that, through watching him with you and Emma." The next few days passed in a blur of hospital visits, garage preparations, and comforting Emma. The young girl insisted on making get-well cards, not just for Pete, but for every patient on his floor. "Because being sick is scary," she explained, "and maybe they don't have family nearby to help them feel better." Maria practically moved into Pete's house, ensuring he'd return to home-cooked meals and a properly organized living space. James and his team worked tirelessly to prepare the garage opening ceremony, incorporating all of Pete's plans while adding their own touches to honor his legacy. The morning Pete was discharged, Emma presented him with a special gift, a leather-bound album filled with photographs and messages from every person whose life he'd touched through the garage. Mechanics he'd trained, customers he'd helped, families he'd supported through tough times, all had contributed their memories and well wishes. "This is what we're building," Pete said hoarsely, turning the pages with careful fingers. "Not just garages or training programs, we're building connections, continuing chains of kindness and knowledge." Sarah watched as Michael helped Pete into the wheelchair required by hospital policy, noting how naturally they interacted now. The crisis had stripped away any remaining formality between them, leaving only the genuine bonds of chosen family. "Ready to go home, Pete?" Michael asked, positioning the wheelchair. "Home?" Pete smiled, reaching for both their hands. "I've got several of those now. The house Maria's probably reorganized beyond recognition. The new garage waiting for its grand opening. And most importantly," he squeezed their fingers, "the family that's grown bigger than I ever expected." As they guided Pete toward the hospital exit where Emma and Maria waited, Sarah felt the truth of his words settle in her heart. Sometimes it took a crisis to reveal what was already there, the unshakable foundation of love and trust they'd built together, strong enough to weather any storm. The grand opening of the first community garage had been postponed by 2 weeks to allow Pete proper time to recover, but the delay only seemed to heighten the community's anticipation. On the morning of the ceremony, Sarah arrived early to find Pete already there, sitting in his old office chair, taking in the transformed space. The renovation had preserved the garage's character while modernizing its capabilities. Old photographs lined the walls, telling the story of Pete's decades of service, now joining new images of training sessions and community programs. The worn wooden workbench where David had first taught Sarah remained in place, restored but unchanged, ready to teach a new generation. "Having second thoughts about retirement?" Sarah asked, setting a cup of his favorite coffee beside him. Pete shook his head, smiling. "Just the opposite. Seeing all this, it's better than anything I imagined for the old place. David would have loved it." The mention of David felt natural now, a warm presence rather than a painful absence. His influence could be seen throughout the garage, from the teaching methods they'd incorporated into the training program to the community-first philosophy that guided every decision. Emma burst in, wearing a junior mechanic's uniform that James had specially designed for the youth program. "Mom, Abuela Maria says you need to come home right now. Something about a surprise before the ceremony." Sarah checked her watch. They had 3 hours before the official opening. What kind of surprise? She made me promise not to tell, Emma said, but her excited bouncing suggested she knew exactly what was planned. When they arrived home, Maria immediately whisked Sarah away to her apartment, leaving Emma with instructions to help Michael, who had apparently arrived earlier. Sarah found herself seated at Maria's vanity, surrounded by the older woman's collection of family photographs. "Something's happening, isn't it?" Sarah asked, watching Maria fuss with her hair. "Life is always happening, mihija," Maria replied cryptically, but her eyes sparkled with secret joy. An hour later, Sarah stood transformed in a simple but elegant blue dress, her mother's pearl necklace, saved for special occasions, gracing her neck. Maria had styled her hair in soft waves, and even Emma had contributed by selecting a pair of small silver earrings that David had given her years ago. When they returned to the garage, Sarah understood. The workbench where she'd first learned to repair engines had been cleared and decorated with tiny white lights. Pete sat nearby, in a new suit, looking healthier than he had in weeks, with Emma practically vibrating with excitement beside him. Michael stepped out from behind a restored classic car, the same model as the one David had been working on when he first met Sarah. He'd changed into a suit as well, but what caught Sarah's attention was what he held. A small silver wrench, polished to gleaming. "I wanted to do this here," he said softly, approaching her. "Where your story began, and where our story can continue." He glanced at Emma, who nodded encouragingly. With Pete's blessing and Emma's enthusiasm and Maria's help in planning this moment, Sarah's heart raced as Michael knelt, holding up the wrench. Attached to it was a ring, not a traditional diamond, but a beautifully crafted band that somehow complemented her wedding ring from David perfectly. "Life is like an engine," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "Complex, sometimes challenging, but beautiful when all the parts work together. You taught me that love isn't about replacing parts of our hearts, but about building something new while honoring what came before." He took a deep breath. "Sarah Mitchell, will you marry me?" Emma could contain herself no longer, rushing forward to hug them both. "Please say yes, Mom. I helped pick the ring. See how it matches Dad's, but it's different too." Sarah looked at her daughter's shining face, then at Pete's proud smile, Maria's joyful tears, and finally at Michael's hopeful eyes. Her hand went to David's ring, which had stopped feeling like a barrier and had become instead a foundation for new love to build upon. "Yes," she whispered, then stronger. "Yes." As Michael slipped the new ring onto her finger alongside David's band, Pete cleared his throat. "I've been working on my retirement speech," he said, pulling out a folded paper. "But I think I'll add something about how a garage isn't just a place to fix cars. It's a place where lives come together, where families grow in unexpected ways, and where love can find you even when you're just trying to fix a broken engine." Emma examined the rings on her mother's hand. "They look right together," she declared, like they were always supposed to be there. Through the garage windows, they could see the gathering crowd for the opening ceremony, community members, future students, James and his training team. But for this moment, time seemed to pause, allowing them to savor the perfect alignment of past and present, of endings and beginnings, of two rings that symbolized not loss and replacement, but growth and continuation. "Now," Pete announced, standing carefully, "let's go open the future to everyone else, too." The family portrait hung prominently in the entrance of their new home. Not a formal studio photograph, but a candid shot taken at the community garage's opening day. Sarah and Michael stood together, her two rings catching the light, while Emma perched on Pete's knee in her junior mechanic's uniform. Maria stood beside them, one hand resting proudly on Emma's shoulder. James Chen had captured the moment perfectly, a family built by choice, bound together by love and shared purpose. Wedding preparations wove seamlessly into their daily lives. Much like the way the garage chain was expanding, organically, thoughtfully, with attention to both tradition and innovation. Sarah had insisted on keeping things simple, planning the ceremony for the garden of their new home once the landscaping was complete. "The memory room is finished," Michael announced one evening, as Emma did homework at the kitchen island while Maria taught Sarah her secret empanada recipe. "I thought, would you like to see it?" Sarah wiped her hands on a dish towel, following Michael down the hallway. The room took her breath away. David's tools hung on one wall, carefully restored and mounted like the treasures they were. Photos traced their history. David teaching Sarah her first repair, their wedding day, Emma's birth, family moments at the garage. But the opposite wall held newer memories. The community garage opening, Michael teaching Emma about engines, the proposal, Pete's recovery celebration. "It's not a shrine," Michael explained softly. "It's a bridge between then and now. A place where all parts of our family story can live together." Emma appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide. "Can I put my first junior mechanic certificate in here when I earn it?" "Of course," Sarah answered, pulling her daughter close. "This room is for all of us." The garage chain's expansion mirrored their family's growth. 3 new locations had opened, each adapting to its community's specific needs while maintaining the core mission. James had developed specialized programs for single parents, veterans, and at-risk youth, creating opportunities that rippled through neighborhoods. Pete, though officially retired, had become a beloved mentor at the training centers. His health scare had actually enhanced his teaching. He now incorporated life lessons about balance and self-care alongside mechanical instruction. "Cars need regular maintenance," he'd tell students, patting his chest with a wry smile, "and so do their mechanics." One Saturday morning, as Sarah helped Emma prepare for her first official junior mechanic class, she found her daughter sitting quietly in the memory room. "I was talking to Dad," Emma explained, looking at David's photograph, "telling him about how Mr. Chen is teaching us safety rules first, just like Dad taught you." She paused, touching the picture frame. "Do you think he'd be okay with me calling Michael Dad, too? Not instead of him, but as well as?" Sarah sat beside her daughter, heart full. "Love grows, sweetheart. It doesn't divide. Your father would be proud of how you've helped build this family." The wedding invitations reflected this philosophy. Instead of traditional formal announcements, they were designed to look like garage service records, complete with technical drawings and a family maintenance schedule that listed regular game nights, Sunday dinners with Maria, and Emma's junior mechanic classes. "Very appropriate," James commented during a planning meeting, grinning at the design. "A marriage is like a well-maintained engine, after all." The garage chain's success had attracted positive attention from the automotive industry. Other companies were beginning to follow their model, creating their own community programs. Rather than viewing them as competition, Michael and Sarah welcomed the expansion of their vision. "The more people we help succeed," Michael explained to a business journal, "the stronger our whole community becomes." This was never about monopolizing the market. It's about changing it for the better. As the wedding approached, Sarah found herself in Pete's old office one quiet evening, looking through the service records that had documented her journey. From grieving widow to confident business partner and bride-to-be. Her fingers traced the entry from the night Michael's car had broken down, marveling at how a simple repair had led to such profound changes. "Having a moment?" Michael's voice came from the doorway. He'd just finished teaching an evening class. With James, his sleeves rolled up and a smudge of grease on his collar. "Just appreciating how far we've come," she replied, showing him the old service record, "and thinking about where we're going." He smiled, understanding as always. "Speaking of which, Emma and Maria are waiting at home. Something about final cake decisions and making sure my taste buds are properly educated about traditional wedding flavors." Sarah closed the service record, ready to head home. The garage would always be where their story began, but their future was growing far beyond its walls, built on a foundation of 2 rings, 3 generations of mechanics, and a love that had enough room for past and present to thrive together. 1 year later, Pete's retirement party filled the original garage with laughter and memories. The celebration doubled as a graduation ceremony for the first class of community program students, including a special junior mechanic certificate. Presentation for Emma, who'd completed her basic training with perfect attendance. Sarah stood at the familiar workbench, now watching her daughter demonstrate proper safety procedures to a group of younger children. Emma wore her father's first wrench on a chain around her neck, a gift Michael had carefully restored and presented to her on their wedding day. Her natural teaching ability reminded Sarah of both David's patience and Michael's gift for explanation. "She's got the best of all of us," Pete observed, settling into his honorary chair, a restored vintage mechanic seat that the students had secretly refurbished as a retirement gift. "The next generation of Mitchell mechanics is in good hands." Michael joined them, having just finished presenting completion certificates with James Chen, who was now running 5 successful training centers across the city. "Speaking of next generation," he said, slipping an arm around Sarah's waist, "should we make the announcement?" Sarah's hand drifted to her stomach, still flat, but holding their secret. Emma already knew. They'd told her first, watching her. Eyes light up at the prospect of becoming a big sister. She'd immediately started planning how to integrate the baby into the junior mechanic program she was helping design for toddlers. Maria, arranging refreshments nearby, hadn't been fooled for a moment by their attempt to keep the news quiet. "A grandmother knows these things," she'd said with a knowing smile, already adjusting her empanada recipe for pregnancy cravings. "Everyone," Michael called out, gathering the attention of their assembled family, by blood, marriage, and choice. "Sarah and I have some news." The celebration that followed filled the garage with even more joy, if possible. Pete wiped away tears, remembering aloud how he'd watched Sarah rebuild her life within these walls, finding not just survival, but renewal. James raised a toast to family in all its forms. Emma proudly showed off the Big Sister Junior Instructor badge she'd been secretly designing with her art teacher. Later that evening, as the party wound down, Sarah found herself alone in the garage's office. 2 rings gleamed on her finger as she opened the service log one last time. The entry from that fateful night when Michael's car broke down had been framed, hanging beside the family portrait from their wedding. "Ready to go home?" Michael asked from the doorway, Emma half asleep against his shoulder. Sarah nodded, taking a final look around the space where so much of her life had transformed. David's presence felt warm and blessing, woven into the foundation of the family they'd built. Pete's legacy lived on in every student who would pass through these doors. Their own story was still being written, expanding with each new day. "Yes," she said, turning off the office light. "Let's go home." Outside, the new sign gleamed, "Mitchell Family Community Garage, where every engine has a story." Below it, Emma's childlike writing added, "And every family has a home."